Please take your seats for the second greatest show on earth. We've got a really exciting lineup for you today, following on from yesterday's postgraduate conference. Sadly, in the best traditions of all conferences, you have to put up with at least 10 minutes of me speaking as the sponsor of today's event about our Centre for Power Electronics, which we launched on the same day. It was actually the 1st of July last year, and since then we've been working hard to set up the mechanisms and infrastructure. As anybody who knows who's been involved in trying to establish one of these large consortium projects, it's not an easy task. So today I'm going to provide you a brief overview of what the centre's all about, and some of the things we've been doing in that, some of the highlights from the past year. And then I'm going to hand over to the rest of the day to our keynote speakers, and I'll introduce those to you after my little introductory talk. So, to begin with, where did we start the story? Well, a few years ago, in fact, 2011, BIS published a strategy document all about power electronics and its importance, its strategic importance to the UK. Out of that strategy, there were a number of recommendations, and one of those was to establish a centre of academic excellence that would bring together some of the top universities in the UK and provide a focal point. And EPSRC responded to that by providing funding in two forms. One in terms of capital investment, which has gone into 6 core universities around the country, and a further £80 million of research funding over a period of 7 years. And this is split between 10 universities around the UK. Some of the funding, of course, has come here to Nottingham, and Nottingham hosts the hub, which is the administrative hub of the centre. On top of the hub, and I'll explain what the hub's all about in a minute, are 4 separate themes, and they're separately funded. Outside the hall here, you should see posters and some exhibits from our research, and each poster explains what the content of the theme is. So I'm not going to try and do that today. We have, as our centre vision, the statement there. So the centre essentially will be the UK's internationally recognised provider of world-leading underpinning power electronics research. And it's important to notice here the role that we play as academics is in providing underpinning research activity, and EPSRC in particular funds work at low technology readiness level. So the sort of things that we're interested in doing as part of the centre are blue skies ideas, things taking concepts through to early stage. A lot of the universities, of course, work at much higher TRL in industrially focused projects with TSB and EU funding, but the focus of the centre, as far as research activity is concerned, is at low technology readiness level. So, our aim is to combine the UK's best academic talent, and it will focus on sustaining and growing power electronics in the UK. And what we would want to do through our research is deliver transformative and exploitable technology, which means it's got to be something that is new and novel, yes, but also something that has potential to be applied in the industrial sector. And on top of that, we would like to see our contribution to the workforce in terms of highly skilled people being realised through the training of postgraduates and the training of postdoctoral engineers, and in so doing provide a long-term strategic value to the UK. So that's our vision, that's our mission statement, if you like. 3 ways we're delivering that. One is through a research programme. as I said before, divided into 4 themes. Another is through community support, and today's event is an example of that. Yesterday's postgraduate event, another example of that. We have a range of activities there which aim to build the community. And as you see, we will go through and I'll highlight some of the things we've been doing in that area. Finally, impact and growth is all about engaging with the industrial community, providing strategic leadership for power electronics, linking with groups around the world, and influencing policy. So what we want to do through that is ensure that our research is, of course, translatable, is translated and transformed into useful output, but also to ensure that we in the UK are recognised as a leading force in power electronics. So, as I mentioned previously, the centre focuses on low TRL. That doesn't mean to say we're not interested in engaging in the higher TRL activities. And how we will do that is by taking our research from the centre and linking that through into projects such as TSB funded projects and EU funded projects, and of course direct industrial funded projects. So the centre brings together some of the foremost academic groups. What we want to do by bringing those groups together is to address key research challenges in a coordinated way. That is by exploiting best with best strategies to ensure that we are complementing each other's work, not trying to duplicate it, and to some extent trying to break down some of the barriers that naturally exist in academia, because we're all, in a sense, competing with one another. So to try and overcome some of those natural hurdles, to build critical mass, to develop a widely recognised research capability, and finally develop a UK research strategy. So that's all about where are we going in the future, what should we be looking at for 2050 and beyond. Okay, so 4 themes: devices, component integration, converters and drives, and the posters for those themes are outside, involving a variety of different universities. We realised quite early on that that was a very broad classification, and we also realised that some very important disciplines, including design tools and modelling, structural and functional integration, and operational management and control, were not necessarily topics in their own right, but applied to all of these. So we talk about cross-theme topics, and each of those themes and cross-theme activities has a particular person assigned to them. So in no particular order, the devices theme is led by Phil Morby. Where is Phil today? There he is. Right, so he's so close to me I can't see him. That's one of the problems of getting old. So Phil is leading the devices theme from Warwick with Bristol, Cambridge and Newcastle, and the research topics there very broadly are design, modelling and fabrication, looking at interfaces, looking at device reliability and power integrated circuits. If you want to know any more about that, Phil and some of his team are here today. Quick show of hands, who's from the devices theme? There was at least, oh look, there you go. So all of those people, if you want to know about devices, make sure you get hold of them in the coffee break. Component integration, led by Phil Meller, who sadly isn't able to be with us today. Partners in that are Greenwich, Imperial, Nottingham and Warwick. And this is moving up the supply chain, so now we're looking at how you put devices, other passive component technologies, how you integrate those. And yesterday there was quite an interesting presentation from Roger Thornton all about integration. I guess was one of the things he was saying, if we want to push up power densities, if we want to reduce costs, then integration is the way forward. We've seen that in microelectronics, of course. But how do you do it at higher power levels effectively? So one big question. So this is looking at things like power module assembly technologies, passive component technologies, and device drivers and sensing. So again, poster outside. Quick show of hands, who's from the devices, who's from the components theme? I've got 1, 2, 3. I'll have to put my hand up as well. Okay, so you can collar us. Okay, Converters is led by Andrew Forsyth from the University of Manchester, who I can see at the front here, because he came in late. Partners in that are Bristol, Imperial, Nottingham and Strathclyde. And high-level objectives there are looking at 2 main thrusts. One is high-voltage conversion, principally intended at HVDC and transmission-level applications. And the second one looking at very high power density conversion for lower power levels, but with total system power densities that are much higher than those in standard converters. And the pictures down there, I think some of these systems and similar ones you can see out on the bench at the front. So, who's from the converters theme? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, good, right. So these people, if you want to know about converters, they're here today. Finally, but by no means least, Barry. Where's Barry? There he is, right. Barry Meckrow from Newcastle leads the drives theme, and along with Bristol, Manchester, Nottingham and Sheffield, they're looking at integration of motors and drives, so important topic we also looked at yesterday on the automotive side is integration of mechanical and electrical functions in the same envelope, fast switching and high availability machine drives. So this is really focusing on how you combine power electronics with the electrical machine, not the two in isolation, hence the name drive rather than electrical machine or power electronics for electrical machine. So it is really emphasizing the integration at drive level. Okay, so who's from the drives theme? Barry, of course. Oh, it's a good show of hands there. Right, so if you want to know about drives, these people are somewhere around today. And we have, of course, got in the session out there a number of posters from around the UK. Some of those are from these themes. Others are from universities associated with the projects that we've got here today. And in the centre of the room, on the inside, you've got a whole range of postgraduate posters, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So, one thing that the centre is very keen to do is ensure that... Hello? Right. One thing we're trying to do with our centre is ensure that we're coordinating as far as possible the training of postgraduates and postdoctoral researchers. So we're not saying that universities don't do a perfectly good job of this already, they do. What we're trying to do here is add something extra by providing events like yesterday where the community can get together and see what each other is doing, try and exchange ideas. And it's distinct from what you might find in a normal power electronics conference in that we're trying to provide an environment that's a bit safer than that, i.e. they're not going to be quizzed by me necessarily about the detail of their project. They're able to discuss with their peers and learn from them, and also discuss some of the problems that they have that they might not be too happy to come and talk to me about directly. So this is all about trying to build community spirit, and we're working quite hard on that. We had an early career researcher day in May, out of which came the idea that we should be forming a community. In fact, we've started to do that. Where's Simon? Simon Lambert is our new researcher rep, who has been tasked with the task of bringing this community together. We had the postgraduate conference yesterday. I know a number of you were at that, and for those of you that were there, I think you found that a very enjoyable experience in terms of, firstly, we had some inspiring keynote presentations, but we also had an interesting poster competition, and we awarded some prizes as well from that. So we're establishing our research community. We're trying to evolve that in a progressive way with an emphasis on the community supporting itself. And really the emphasis here is that we're not just looking at the universities who are funded out of the research funding, we're looking at any UK university that has an interest in power electronics being a part of this skills and training activity. because only by sharing experience are we going to be able to move things forward in a faster and more competitive way. So, the Centre has another community activity which is in delivering flexible funding, and there are two streams for this. One is to provide funding for people, universities, institutions outside the original consortium. So that's to diversify the science base, and we've held a call in February this year, and the call was in two parts. One was to carry out feasibility studies, pump priming activities, and the second one was to fund within the centre tightly focused projects which bring the themes together. So that process all went out to international peer review, and the panel met a few weeks ago now. 7 projects were funded out of that, and we'll be announcing the results of that at the end of the day today. A total of 950k was spent from our budget of 3 million, so that leaves us with about 2 million left for those of you who are interested. The next call will be early 2015, and I'd like that to focus on early career researchers, and I'm going to extend that out to researchers, postdoctoral researchers, not just academics. So that'll be an interesting departure for us. Okay, so one of the other things we've been doing this year is looking at how we can strengthen our ties with other organisations, develop an industrial engagement strategy, and we have, as you probably noticed, quite strong links to Power Electronics UK. We use their branding, and that's deliberate in order to provide a united front. Power Electronics UK has an industrial leadership group, and the industrial side of that is very much focused on maintaining the commercial drive of Power Electronics in the UK. The centre complements that, and the two obviously work together to try and deliver the interface where we're building the links between academia and industry. We have at the moment a capability directory which is similar to the NMI Industrial Capability Directory that you may be familiar with for those who've seen it, and that will, when it's complete, allow people to go in and see what university is doing what, so that you don't have to go and trawl through Google and try and work out how many different sites you've got to search before you find out which university has facilities for doing a particular bit of work. We have an industrial liaison officer who's Alistair Johnson from MTC, and this is a jointly funded post, so it's funded 50-50 with the centre, and the main aim of that post is really, as it says there, is to ensure that the things we're doing in the centre are relevant to industry, and that industry know about the things we're doing in the centre. And out of that, we expect to see some strategy forming which allows us to influence funders such as TSB, EPSRC about where they're putting their money and when they're putting their money. Because one of the things that has been apparent to me over the years is that there's a complete lack of joined-up thinking between the funding bodies, i.e. you get a very good EPSRC project coming to an end, you've got some industry somewhere wanting to do something with that, but there's no TSB call of relevance to it. And this, through the years, has been a continual frustration, I think. So how do we try and influence strategy so that that becomes less of an issue? Some interesting developments there on things like the energy catalyst, which is responsive mode TSB, but maybe we could see more of that starting to appear. We've linked up with eFutures, so that's the electronics network that EPSRC fund. So that's a much broader community, and Power Electronics you could either view as being part of the UK electronics community. It's certainly a very important part of it, and therefore we're maintaining links. We're looking at joint events there where we can raise greater awareness in the broader electronics community of what we're doing in Power Electronics. Coming out of Power Electronics UK, there's a technology roadmap going to be published sometime later this summer. That we're going to be taking on, and developing in terms of academia industry workshops. So looking forward to the end of this year, we'll be running some themed workshops in that area with the aim of trying to identify where our research priorities should be. Finally, we have, through our friend in Imperial, where's Paul Mitchison today? Is he not here? He's at Imperial. Oh dear. Okay, he was here yesterday. Anyway, Paul has arranged, he's our community and outreach person. Paul has arranged for us to have a 3-day exhibit at the Science Museum in London, which I think is an excellent opportunity to try and publicise some of the things we're doing in power electronics in a broad sense. So we'll be working on that over the next few weeks. Right, so as I said, the centre is funded to carry out research at low TRL, but that's by no means the end of the story. Industrial engagement is obviously part of our portfolio of projects, collaborative funded projects with TSB and EU funding, and because the centre works at low TRL, we're developing an IP strategy that means if we develop IP, then we want to make that available. Each university will do its utmost to ensure that it is available and translatable. That's to mean that we're not going to attempt at the outset to try and ring-fence bits of IP for particular organisations. We are trying to do this in the broadest UK interest. Okay, so if there is IP coming out of this, if you see things coming out of the centre that you'd like to talk about, then we're open to your suggestions in terms of licensing that IP, and indeed you should go back to the individual universities and talk to them about it, because our strategy is to ensure the broadest possible uptake of any IP that comes out of the centre. So we're linking with external projects. I think today we've got 2 EPSRC funded projects represented. One is on gallium nitride on silicon, and the second one is energy networks. So we'll hear about those later in the day. How are we going to be measured at the end of all of this? Well, naturally, what we want to see is an uptake, an increase in power electronics research in the UK, and not just that funded through the centre. We want to see a substantial increase in IP being generated. We want to see increased technology transfer. We want to see the whole platform of skills addressed. Now, we need to be doing that bit of that ourselves, but we can help to enthuse others to make sure that the message is getting across to the younger generation, because it's only those younger people that are going to provide that supply of the people we need to do this work. Part of that is getting the message across to policymakers. So how do we influence policy? How do we get the public aware of what power electronics is all about? How do we get them engaged? These are the big questions that we still have to address, and those are our challenges as the centre. Okay, so we can't do that on our own because some of those questions are very broad. Engineering as a whole has got a massive skills shortage. So we work with other organisations, in particular people like NMI, the IET, Power Electronics UK, the Manufacturing Technology Centre, etc., etc. And we're doing that to leverage our funding and leverage their funding to ensure we can get maximum benefit. That's just a quick list of who's who. If you want to refer back to that, I'm sure the ladies, Helena and Michelle on the front desk, will be able to provide you with all the contact details you need. In summary, we're working to build the UK community in the broadest sense: research, skills, community, impact. Lots of opportunities for getting involved, whether it's through workshops, research, training, sponsoring PhD students, you name it. If you want any further details, the website, the contact details are up there, and we look forward to working with you. So, thank you very much for that. I've just got one final thing I want to tell you about. That's today's event. So, right now, we're going to move on to our first speaker, and that's Professor Johann Kohler from ETH in Zurich. And after the break, we've got Professor Ian Thane, who is going to be talking to us about gallium nitride on silicon. And the afternoon, we've got Tim Green, who I know is here somewhere, lurking. He's there, hiding at the back. Tell us about the role of power electronics in low voltage distribution networks. Interesting area, very new area for power electronics. And finally, Bill Drury is going to be closing our keynotes with a discussion about where power electronics makes a real difference. And we'll see what that's all about later on. So there's a long lunch session, and I want you to take advantage of that. We've got 1 3/4 hours in which you can network, go around, discuss, look at posters, etc., etc. And I want you to take advantage of that as much as possible.